Comment where you're watching from today as we share a story that reminds us how a simple gesture can change everything. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we least expect them, in places as ordinary as a parking lot after a long day. It was a crisp evening in Los Angeles, the kind where the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the empty practice facility parking lot. Russell Westbrook, still in his practice gear, pushed through the heavy double doors of the Lakers training center. His muscles ached from the intense workout session he'd just completed, staying hours after his teammates had left, working on his jump shot, trying to silence the critics who seemed to grow louder with each passing game. The weight of expectations had been particularly heavy lately. Every missed shot became a headline, every turnover a topic for endless debate. The same passion and intensity that had once made him the NBA's most valuable player now drew criticism from fans and analysts alike. But Russell wasn't someone who knew how to play any other way than all out, even if it meant being misunderstood. As he walked toward his car, his mind replayed the countless comments he'd heard recently. Past his prime, liability, not a good fit. He'd learned to keep his game face on, to show the world his unwavering confidence, but alone in moments like these, the words still found their way in. 20 years of basketball from the playgrounds of Los Angeles to the bright lights of the NBA. And sometimes it felt like people only remembered your last mistake. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars belonging to the cleaning staff and late-working coaches. Russell's footsteps echoed against the concrete, each step carrying the weight of a day spent proving himself all over again. His car, a sleek black Mercedes, stood alone under one of the lot's fluorescent lights, a familiar sight after these long practice sessions. But tonight was different. As he approached his car, something caught his eye, a small white envelope tucked beneath his windshield wiper. His first instinct was to dismiss it as another piece of promotional material, the kind that sometimes found its way even into secure parking lots. Yet something about the way it was placed, carefully centered on his windshield, made him pause. Russell reached for the envelope, noticing it wasn't sealed but neatly folded. The paper was high quality, the kind used for formal correspondence, not marketing materials. No name was written on the outside, but he could feel something solid inside, more than just a single sheet of paper. Standing under the harsh fluorescent light, Russell unfolded the envelope, his fingers running along its crisp edges. Inside, he found a handwritten letter and something else, a small, worn photograph that made his breath catch in his throat. The image was from nearly 2 decades ago, showing a young boy in an oversized basketball jersey, his face beaming with unmistakable joy. The letter began simply, "Dear Mr. Westbrook, you won't remember me, but you changed my life 15 years ago." The handwriting was neat, but carried the slight tremor of someone who had put great care into every word. As Russell's eyes moved across the first few lines, the sounds of the city seemed to fade away, replaced by the gentle rustling of paper and the beating of his own heart. Time seemed to stand still in that parking lot as Russell began to read, unaware that this moment, this simple act of finding a letter on his windshield, would spark a chain of events that would remind him why he fell in love with the game in the first place. It would show him that sometimes, when you think nobody sees your struggles, someone has been watching all along, waiting for the right moment to remind you of who you really are. The story that began with that letter would touch not just Russell's life, but the lives of countless others. It would prove that in a world quick to judge and slow to understand, genuine connections can still cut through the noise. But first, he had to read those words, carefully penned by someone who had been carrying a message for 15 years, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver it. A gentle breeze rustled the pages in his hands, and overhead, the fluorescent light, flickered briefly, as if signaling the start of something significant. Russell leaned against his car, his post-practice exhaustion forgotten, and began to read the story that would change everything. The same parking lot that had witnessed countless arrivals and departures was about to witness something extraordinary. A reminder that sometimes the most meaningful moments come disguised as ordinary ones, waiting to be discovered by those willing to pause and notice them. In the distance, the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the Los Angeles skyline, and Russell Westbrook, one of the most dynamic players in NBA history, stood alone in a parking lot, holding a piece of paper that would remind him why every minute of practice, every critic's voice, and every moment of doubt had been worth it. The story was just beginning, and with each word he read, the weight of recent struggles began to lift, replaced by something more powerful. The realization that impact often reaches further than we can see, and that sometimes it takes a stranger's words to help us remember who we've always been. Have you ever received a message that changed everything? A note that came at exactly the right moment? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes the most powerful reminders of our worth come when we least expect them, from people we may have touched without even knowing it. Under the fluorescent light of the parking lot, Russell Westbrook began to read the letter that would reshape his perspective on everything he thought he knew about his journey. The handwritten words flowed across the page, carrying a story that had been waiting 15 years to be told. Dear Mr. Westbrook, you won't remember me, but you changed my life 15 years ago. My name is Marcus Thompson. In the photograph, I've included, I'm the skinny kid wearing your high school jersey, standing outside the gym at losing a high school. I was 12 years old then, and that day would become the foundation of everything I've achieved since. I grew up in Lawndale, just like you did. Back then, I was the kid everyone overlooked. Too small for basketball, too quiet to stand out. My single mom worked 2 jobs, and I spent most afternoons watching basketball practice through the gym windows, dreaming of being part of something bigger than myself. The security guards usually shooed me away, but that day was different. You were already the star of the team, but what I remember most wasn't your incredible plays or your intensity on the court. It was what happened after practice. You saw me outside, watching as always, and instead of ignoring me like everyone else did, you waved me in. I can still hear your words. You come here to watch every day. Why don't you come in and learn something? Instead, for the next hour, you showed me dribbling drills, taught me about footwork, and most importantly, you told me something I'd never forget. It's not about how others see you. It's about how hard you're willing to work when nobody's watching. You probably said it without thinking twice, but for a kid who felt invisible, those words became my North Star. The photo I've included was taken by the janitor at my request. I kept it in my locker all through middle school and high school. When people told me I was too small, too slow, or not good enough, I'd look at that photo and remember what you taught me, that greatness isn't about natural gifts, it's about relentless dedication. Today, I'm a high school basketball coach in Lawndale. Every day I work with kids who remind me of myself, the ones who others might overlook. I tell them your story, about how you were never the most highly recruited player, but you outworked everyone to become MVP. I share with them what you taught me about persistence, about playing with heart, and about staying true to yourself, even when others doubt you. I've been following your journey, Mr. Westbrook, through all the highs and lows. I've seen how some people try to diminish your impact, how they criticize your passion and intensity. But they don't see what I see. A player who has never changed who he is, who plays every game like it's his last, who shows kids like I was that it's okay to be different, to be intense, to care so much it hurts. Recently, I've noticed the media criticism getting louder. I've wanted to write this letter for years, But something told me this was the right moment, because while they focus on stats and percentages, they miss the real impact you've had. They don't see the kids in my gym trying to copy your pre-game routine, wearing your number, playing with that same fierce determination. You should know that in my office at school, that same photo still hangs on my wall. Students often ask about it, and it gives me a chance to tell them about the player who took time for a nobody kid, who taught me that our dreams are valid no matter what others say. Last week, one of my players got a scholarship to play college basketball. In his acceptance speech, he quoted what I always tell them: your words about working hard when nobody's watching. Your impact isn't just measured in triple doubles or championship rings. It's measured in the countless lives you've touched, in the kids who learn that it's okay to be passionate, to be different, to be unapologetically themselves. Every time I see you play with that same fire, even after all these years, it reminds me why I fell in love with the game. I'm not writing this looking for anything in return. I simply wanted you to know that while critics may focus on what they think you're not, there are people out there who know exactly what you are: an inspiration, a role model, and proof that heart and hard work can take you anywhere. Thank you for that day 15 years ago. Thank you for showing a kid that he was worth your time. And thank you for continuing to play the game the only way you know how, with everything you've got. With gratitude, Marcus Thompson, head basketball coach, Lusinger High School. As Russell finished reading, he found himself staring at the photograph. Again, the memory of that day had faded with time, lost among countless other moments in a career spanning decades. But now it all came rushing back. The skinny kid outside the gym, the simple act of inviting him in, the basic drills they'd practiced together. He remembered thinking at the time how much the kid reminded him of himself at that age, hungry to learn, desperate to prove himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. On a day when he'd stayed late at practice, pushing himself to answer his critics, the universe had delivered a reminder that his greatest impact had come not from a spectacular play or a record-breaking performance, but from a simple act of kindness. On a random afternoon 15 years ago, the letter trembled slightly in his hands, not from the evening breeze, but from the weight of its meaning. In a career filled with historic achievements, MVP awards, and countless accolades, this might be the most powerful validation he'd ever received. Proof that sometimes our greatest contributions come in moments we don't even remember. Russell carefully folded the letter and photo, placing them back in the envelope. The parking lot was completely empty now, the silence broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. But in that moment, Russell Westbrook, one of the most dynamic players in NBA history, felt something shift inside him. A reminder that while critics might question his game, they could never diminish the impact he'd had on people's lives. Tomorrow, he would return to this same facility, face the same critics, and play with the same intensity that had defined his career. But now he would carry with him the knowledge that somewhere out there, in the same neighborhood where his journey began, his legacy was alive in the dreams of young players, learning the game from a coach who had once been a kid with a dream of his own. Have you ever discovered that a small act of kindness you'd forgotten about had changed someone's life? Share your stories in the comments below, because sometimes our greatest impacts come not from our biggest achievements, but from the moments when we simply choose to see someone who feels invisible. The drive home from the practice facility that night was different for Russell Westbrook. The familiar streets of Los Angeles passed by his window, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Back in a high school gym 15 years ago, sharing basketball fundamentals with a kid who would never forget that moment. The letter lay carefully placed on the passenger seat, its weight far exceeding its physical presence. Instead of heading straight home, Russell found himself taking a detour, driving through the streets of Lawndale. The neighborhood had changed in some ways since his high school days, but the essence remained the same. Young kids playing basketball on concrete courts, dreams as big as the California sky, and the constant reminder that every success story had to start somewhere. He pulled into the parking lot of Losing High School, his old stomping grounds. The gym lights were still on, a beacon in the growing darkness. Through the windows, he could see basketball practice was in session. The scene was so familiar, it almost felt like stepping back in time. Inside, players ran drills under the watchful eye of their coach, Marcus Thompson, the once skinny kid who now carried forward the lessons learned on this very court. Russell sat in his car, watching the practice unfold. He could see Marcus demonstrating proper defensive stance, his gestures animated, his passion evident even from a distance. The players hung on every word, just as Marcus had done with Russell's instruction all those years ago. The cycle of mentorship, of passing down not just skills, but belief, was playing out right before his eyes. Taking out his phone, Russell began to research Marcus Thompson's coaching career. The stories he found painted a picture of a man dedicated to more than just basketball. Articles in local papers highlighted his work with at-risk youth, his perfect graduation rate among players, and the growing number of college scholarships his students were earning. One piece particularly caught his eye, a feature about Marcus's annual summer basketball camp, where no kid was turned away, regardless of their ability to pay. The similarities to his own journey weren't lost on Russell. He too had benefited from mentors who saw past his circumstances to his potential, who invested time in his development, not just as a player, but as a person. Now Marcus was doing the same for a new generation, creating a ripple effect of positive change that extended far beyond the basketball court. Russell pulled out the letter again, rereading Marcus's words about the critics and their focus on stats and percentages. For years, he'd handled criticism by channeling it into fuel for his intense playing style, using doubters' words to drive him harder. But this letter offered a different perspective, a reminder that true impact often happens in moments that never make the highlight reels. He thought about his own children, about the lessons he wanted to teach them. In that moment, he realized that Marcus's letter hadn't just validated his past actions, it had provided a blueprint for his future legacy. The game of basketball had given him a platform, but it was what he did with that platform that would define his true impact. Taking out his phone again, Russell opened his notes app and began to write. Ideas flowed rapidly about starting a mentorship program, about partnering with coaches like Marcus to reach more kids, about creating opportunities for young players to learn not just basketball skills, but life lessons about perseverance, authenticity, and the importance of lifting others as you climb. As he wrote, he remembered something his father had told him years ago. Success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you inspire others to achieve. Marcus Thompson was living proof of that principle. The skinny kid watching practice through the windows had grown into a man who was now opening doors for others, creating a chain reaction of opportunity and hope. The gym lights suddenly went dark, practice evidently over for the day. Russell watched as players filed out, their laughter and chatter carrying across the parking lot. Marcus emerged last, locking up the gym. Even from a distance, Russell could see the dedication in his demeanor, the way he checked the doors twice, the final glance back at the gym, the kind of habits formed by someone who truly cares about their responsibility to others. For a moment, Russell considered getting out of his car, walking over to introduce himself to Marcus, but something held him back. This wasn't the right time. What Marcus had shared in his letter deserved more than a casual parking lot meeting. It deserved a response that would honor the impact of that long-ago interaction and amplify its effects for a new generation. Starting his car, Russell began the drive home, his mind already forming plans. The critics would still be there tomorrow. The pressure to perform would remain intense, but something fundamental had shifted. The letter had reminded him of a crucial truth, that greatness isn't just measured in points scored or games won, but in the lives touched and the dreams inspired along the way. As he drove, Russell thought about his next game. He would play with the same intensity, the same passion that had defined his career. But now, each time he took the court, he would carry with him the knowledge that somewhere in the stands, there might be another kid watching, another life waiting to be changed. By a simple act of kindness or a moment of recognition, the Los Angeles night spread out before him, a canvas of lights and possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But for now, Russell Westbrook, one of the most explosive players in NBA history, felt a different kind of energy coursing through him. Not the familiar surge of competitive fire, but the quiet power of knowing that his greatest assists might be the ones that never showed up in any box score. Have you ever discovered that something you did years ago had grown into something bigger than you could have imagined? Share your stories of unexpected impact in the comments below, because sometimes the smallest moments of kindness can grow into the most powerful legacies. 1 month after finding that letter on his windshield, Russell Westbrook stood in the gleaming practice facility of the Lakers, but this time he wasn't alone. The court was filled with the energy of 30 high school basketball coaches from across Los Angeles, all gathered for the first meeting of what Westbrook had named the Impact Initiative. Among them, standing quietly near the back, was Marcus Thompson, still unaware that his letter had sparked this entire movement. The morning had started with a simple introduction from Russell. "A few weeks ago, someone reminded me that our greatest achievements aren't always the ones that make headlines. Sometimes they're the moments we've forgotten about, the small acts of kindness that change lives in ways we never see. Today, we're going to talk about how we can create more of those moments." Russell had spent the weeks following his discovery of the letter meticulously planning this program. He'd reached out to coaches across the city, focusing on those working in underserved communities, those who saw potential in kids that others might overlook. The response had been overwhelming. Educators and mentors who shared his vision of using basketball as a tool for changing lives. As he addressed the group, Russell held up the worn photograph from Marcus's letter, now laminated and preserved. "This picture," he explained, "was taken 15 years ago when I was just a high school player myself. The kid in this photo is now one of you, a coach changing lives every day. He taught me something powerful, that our impact goes far beyond what we can see, and that every moment we spend lifting others up creates ripples that can transform communities." The coaches listened intently as Russell outlined his vision. The Impact Initiative would provide resources, mentorship, and support to high school basketball programs across Los Angeles. But more than that, it would create a network of mentors dedicated to seeing the potential in every kid who picked up a basketball, whether they were future NBA stars or just young people looking for somewhere to belong. "This isn't just about basketball," Russell continued, his voice carrying the same intensity he brought to the court. "It's about being there for kids who need someone to believe in them. It's about creating spaces where they can be themselves, where their passion isn't seen as a liability but as a strength. And it's about remembering that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply open the door and invite someone in." As he spoke these words, his eyes met Marcus's in the crowd. The recognition passed between them. Mentor and mentee, now equals in their commitment to changing young lives. Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to understanding as he realized that his letter had not just been read, but had catalyzed something extraordinary. Russell introduced the key components of the initiative: funding for after-school programs, equipment for underfunded schools, mentorship training for coaches, and scholarships for students who embodied the spirit of hard work and dedication. But the heart of the program was what he called the open door policy, inspired by that long-ago day when he'd invited a young Marcus Thompson into the gym. Every program in this initiative will have time set aside for the kids who aren't on the team yet, the ones watching through the windows, dreaming of their chance, because talent doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it needs someone to notice it, nurture it, and give it room to grow. The morning session transitioned into practical workshops, with coaches sharing their experiences and strategies. Russell moved through the groups, listening and learning from these educators who worked in the trenches every day. But his most meaningful conversation came during the lunch break, when he finally had the chance to speak privately with Marcus Thompson. They sat in the empty stands of the practice facility, two generations of basketball passion united by a single moment. From 15 years ago, I never expected that letter to lead to all this, Marcus admitted, gesturing to the bustling activity below. I just wanted you to know what that day meant to me. Russell smiled, pulling out the original letter, now carefully protected in a leather portfolio. This reminded me of something I needed to hear, that our legacy isn't just about what we do on the court. It's about the lives we touch when no one's keeping score. As the afternoon session began, Russell introduced a surprise. He'd arranged. Through the facility's doors came a stream of students, one from each of the participating coaches' programs. Among them were kids who reminded him of both his younger self and the young Marcus Thompson, passionate, hungry for opportunity, carrying dreams bigger than their circumstances. The coaches spent the rest of the day working with not just their own students, but with all the young players, creating new connections and breaking down the barriers that often divided neighborhoods and communities. The practice court became a laboratory of learning, where veteran coaches shared their knowledge while remaining open to the fresh perspectives of their younger counterparts. As the day drew to a close, Russell gathered everyone for a final message. Today is just the beginning, he announced. What we're building here isn't about one person or one program. It's about creating a network of support that will outlast all of us. Every kid deserves someone who sees their potential, who's willing to open the door and say, "Come in and learn something." The impact was immediate and visible. Coaches exchanged contact information, making plans for inter-school programs and shared resources. Students who had arrived as strangers left as friends, their shared love of basketball transcending neighborhood boundaries. And Marcus Thompson stood a little taller, knowing that his story had helped create something that would benefit countless young athletes. In the weeks and months that followed, the Impact Initiative grew beyond even Russell's initial vision. Other NBA players, inspired by the program's success, began developing similar initiatives in their own communities. The simple act of kindness from 15 years ago had multiplied, creating a wave of positive change that spread far beyond the basketball court. Russell kept the letter and photograph in his locker, a constant reminder of why he played the game. On tough days, when the critics' voices grew loud or his shots weren't falling, he would look at that image of a young Marcus Thompson and remember that his true impact couldn't be measured in statistics or championships alone. The media eventually got wind of the story, eager to cover the NBA star's new community program. But in interviews, Russell always redirected the focus to the coaches and kids who were the real heart of the initiative. "I'm just returning the favor," he would say. "Someone once opened a door for me, and now it's my turn to keep those doors open for others. 1 year later, at the first anniversary celebration of the Impact Initiative, Russell stood center court once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Marcus Thompson, along with dozens of coaches and hundreds of students who had benefited from the program. The gymnasium was filled with stories of transformation, of kids who had found their confidence, of coaches who had become mentors, of communities that had grown stronger through the power of shared purpose. As Russell looked out at the gathered crowd, he saw something that statistics could never capture: the tangible evidence of how small acts of kindness could grow into movements that changed lives. The critics might still focus on his playing style or question his decisions on the court, but they couldn't deny the impact he was having where it mattered most. Have you ever had the chance to give back to someone who helped you along the way, or discovered that your own acts of kindness had grown into something bigger than you imagined? Share your stories in the comments below. Because sometimes the most powerful plays we make in life happen far from any basketball court. In those quiet moments when we choose to open a door and invite someone else to dream bigger.